So Vincent Povey again, historian for RAF Blakehill Farm. We've come down now to Waypoint number 1, which is part of our audio tour today. We've come down onto the original perimeter track, or part of the original perimeter track. We've turned left from the original from the modern entrance, and we're about 80 metres down away from the metal gate, which you will see to your right. If you orientate yourselves so your back is to the hedgerow and you are facing into the meadow, you will see on your skyline a radio mast in the very, very, very far distance. We have to imagine that 700 years ago the area was part of the ancient Braden Forest, which was a hunting ground for King John. You have to imagine this area covered in mature trees and thick woodland. There is evidence of a moated feature which may have been used for keeping animals or a forest guardian over on the eastern side of the airfield. It is featured on all the aerial photographs, and it is a scheduled ancient monument. It's never been fully excavated, but it's thought that there was either a dwelling there or it may have been an animal enclosure. In 1943, the government requisitioned 580 acres of land to create an airfield by compulsory purchase. The airfield was named RAF Blakehill, taken from the name of the farm that once stood on top of the hill to the south of the airfield. You'll see that, and I will point that out to you as we continue our way round. The ruins of the farmhouse, the yard and the buildings are still situated on the hill on the private land. It's difficult now, but if you look around yourself as I'm giving you this commentary, try and imagine this place with no mature trees or hedgerows. Imagine it as a completely flat piece of land. RAF Blakehill was one of 3 airfields, the others being Broadwell near Burford and Downampney near Cirencester, to be constructed north of Swindon to house 46 Group, the RAF formation that brought together the tactical air transport squadrons that were to support the army in the planned invasion of Europe. It was planned as an A-type airfield, dispersed across 14 sites, the airfield being just site number 1. The site was originally built for the American Air Force. It was designed for the 9th Bomber Group. There is a bomb dump at RAF Blakehill, but it was never used to store bombs. By the time the war had moved on, by the time the airfield had been completed, it was more important to get men and supplies into Europe than it was to bomb cities. So it became a transport base. There were other dispersed sites stretching all the way up the hill towards Cricklade. So to your left, as you stand looking across the meadow, the road that would take you into Cricklade was completely covered in occupation for the airfield. There was a technical site, which is now the industrial estate at Chelworth. There was a NAFI block, there was barrack accommodation, there was a casualty evacuation centre, which was key, of course, to the nurses bringing the wounded back from Normandy. And there was even its own sewage works, which was built out onto the Malmesbury Road. Aircraft that flew from this site were Douglas C-47 Dakotas, Airspeed Horsa gliders, Armstrong Whitworth Albemarle armoured transports, General Aircraft Company Hamilcar gliders, Airspeed Oxfords and Chipmunks trainers. There was also a Tiger Moth, which was being used as a communication hack. The station opened on the 9th of February 1944. By the 28th of February 1944, only 315 personnel were stationed on site. The site was largely still being completed and the ground conditions were very poor, with many structures being of a temporary nature. By the end of March 1944, however, over 1,900 personnel were on site, made up of British, Canadian, New Zealand, Australian men and WAFs. Eventually, there were nearly 3,000 personnel on site. Eventually, there were more people said to be at Blakehill than actually lived in Cricklade. We're standing at the end of runway number 1. As you look out across the meadow today, there's nothing to see. It's just grassland. But if you come back in the winter months when the grass has been cut and the frost is on the ground, you can just about make an outline out of the ghost of the runway. This is runway number 1. It runs north to south and was 1,410 yards long. The concrete that was here is now underneath the M4. When the M4 was built, nobody wanted World War II airfields, so the thinking was rip up the old runways, you've got your hardcore, put it under the M4. Through the gate to our left, as we look down the track around the corner onto private land, there is a banjo-shaped piece of tarmac, which was big enough for the largest aircraft of the time to be able to do a swing 360, and that was a compass calibration pad, which is just there, and that is, like I say, on private land. Around the track, as you follow the hedgerow around, there was the first hangar on site. There was 2 hangars. This was a T2 hangar. It was 250 foot long by 115 feet wide by 29 feet high, which of course has now been demolished. The second hangar was across on the southern end of the airfield, which is right on the horizon, as you can see from here. Behind us in the field, which you unfortunately won't be able to see, but if you turn around anyway, through the hedge, there is a fixed vehicle ramp, which is part of the surviving beam approach system. There are 2 rails aligned with the centre line of the runway and would have been used where a Bedford truck equipped with radio equipment would have parked to allow aircraft to use this early form of radar system. The main runway to the south of the airfield had a permanently installed system. Now, to have surviving parts of this system is actually quite rare, and the beam approach system at Blakehill was installed in 1945 and used by the Radio Age training flight, who eventually left in 1946. They used to fly from South Cerney. We're going to move on now to the first of the fuel dumps, runway number 3, and I will give you a little bit of information about the farms that were lost during the airfield's construction. So if you want to turn to your right and head back through the gate where you came in, we'll continue our walk up along the perimeter track.